Hi there, good afternoon. I'm Joan. Welcome to my kitchen. Today I'm going to be doing a recipe that's a little bit of a throwback. It's something that's called Franco Mint Pie, and this is something that I learned how to make from a coworker in the very early 1980s. You may know that I lived in Chicago for much of my life, and I was working in a doctor's office in Highland Park, north of Chicago, and one of my coworkers' sons had his bar mitzvah, and her mother-in-law had made all these pies for the bar mitzvah, and there was quite a bit left over that she brought into the office, and it was this delicious Frango Mint Pie. The best way that I can describe it is sort of like a chocolate silk pie, but with a chocolate mint flavor, which is a flavor combination that I really like a lot. So I got the recipe from her, and that's what I'm going to be making today. If you have any questions along the way, please go ahead and drop them into the chat, and I will answer them either live or on the recording. I'll get back in and answer them for you. And I wanted to mention also that I'm feeling a little bit nostalgic today because we just learned over the weekend that the High Ridge YMCA on the north side of Chicago is going to be closing down in the new year. And this was a YMCA that's been there for 70 years. And it nurtured many kids and families, including my own. It was very close to Decatur Classical School that my kids attended from kindergarten through 6th grade, and it was their after-school program. And I have so many fond memories, and my kids, of course, have even more. The girls were on the swim team there, and all my kids attended summer camp. And then there was also a group of kids who all belonged to the same temple, and my friend Debbie Porter would go and pick the kids up from the Y to take them to the temple for their Hebrew school classes. So it's kind of sad that it's going to be closing, and we're all feeling pretty nostalgic about it. Franco Mints were, or still are, a candy that's sold in department stores in Chicago. They came from Marshall Field. I think they originally were developed in a store in Seattle. And it's a milk chocolate mixed with mint. I mean, now there are quite a few other flavors, but that was the classic one. And there was just a hint of salt in there as well. And the Frango Mint Pie doesn't actually have any Frango mints in it, but it does take the mint and chocolate flavors and put them together. It's not a hard recipe to make, and it's not a time-consuming recipe to make. It does need some time to chill, and I'll explain why as we're going through. Today, I'm actually going to be making a homemade graham cracker crust for this pie. You can also make a chocolate cookie crust, which is using like the famous wafers and crushing those and making it the same way that we make a graham cracker crust. Or you can also make, you can buy store-bought crust. And that reminds me, I need to melt my butter. I will be right back. Sorry about that. So while the butter is melting in the microwave, I can tell you a little bit about this recipe. This recipe does use raw eggs, and some of you might feel squeamish about that. You can use raw eggs. If you're really uncertain about it, look for pasteurized eggs, which are safe to consume raw. But otherwise, if you want to make this recipe and you can't get pasteurized eggs, or you're not that concerned about it, make sure that you use eggs that are very fresh, and look at the shells very carefully to make sure that there aren't any cracks in the shells, because the cracks are how you get bacteria into the eggs, and so you don't want to have any bacteria. I've made this pie numerous times, and nobody has ever gotten any kind of food poisoning from it, so that's a good thing, but I did want to be upfront and candid about that. To make the graham cracker crust, we're going to be using graham crackers. If you don't have or you can't find graham cracker crumbs, you can get regular graham crackers and crush them in a Ziploc bag with a rolling pin or something like that. There's some melted butter that's in the pie crust, and then there's sugar, and that's it. My butter is ready, so I'm going to go grab that. So this is taking just a little bit over a cup of graham cracker crumbs, which I've already got measured out. So I'm going to put that in a bowl here. And then a 1/4 cup of sugar, which I've also got measured out, and that goes in there. And then the melted butter, which is going to kind of hold it together. So I'm going to stir together my sugar and my graham cracker crumbs, and I'll show you real quickly what that looks like. And I'm just going to drizzle in the butter while I'm stirring this with a fork. and it's kind of getting like a crumbly appearance to it, you know, like a little bit like thick sand, and it's not going to get much more than that. It's going to be lumpy, but as I press it into the pie pan, it's going to hold together. There are two options for this pie crust. You can either bake it to get it to hold together, or you can put it in the refrigerator and chill it for about an hour. I prefer to bake it because I like the extra toastiness that you get when you're baking it, and I think it also is kind of like more crunchy if you bake it rather than just chilling it down in the refrigerator. Move these things out of the way so you can see what I'm doing here. So I've got my little pie tin here, and I'm going to go ahead and portion out some of the graham cracker crumbs mixed with melted butter and sugar in there. And I'm going to take my fork and just start patting this down with the fork to kind of like flatten it in the bottom. I like having a really thick crust. I like the texture of it, and I like the flavor of it. Definitely the overwhelming flavor of this pie is the chocolate and the mint, but the graham cracker crust does give it a nice flavor, and I like using big grains of sugar that stay identifiable when you're eating the pie crust. So to get the graham cracker crumbs up on the side of the pie pan, I'm taking like a forkful of the crust and kind of like laying it down right next to the edge of the pie pan and then patting that out. The melted butter that's in the mixture here is helping to hold this together. And I'm almost done with this one, just getting that ready to go into the oven. And it doesn't have to be perfect because this is going to be covered up by the chocolate filling. So this is what my prepared pie crust looks like, and I'm going to bake this one, but I already have one that's baked, so you can see what it looks like. It's a little bit crispy around the edges, so we're going to use that. Move this out of the way. So for the Franco Mint Pie itself, there's very few ingredients. There's unsweetened chocolate. This is Baker's unsweetened chocolate. I suppose that you could make it with semi-sweet chocolate chips if you were not able to find unsweetened chocolate, but you really should be able to find this, and this makes it have a good consistency. I came across a recipe that used powdered cocoa instead of chocolate. I don't think that you would end up with the right consistency if you use powdered cocoa. I think that there would be too much dry ingredients in it and it might be a little bit too grainy. It was interesting when I got these today. I realized that they've kind of downsized these. They used to come in a package that was 8 ounces, and each of the little squares was 1 ounce, and it was wrapped in paper. And it's not like that anymore. It's still wrapped in paper, but the whole thing is only 4 ounces. And instead of having individual squares, it's a big bar of chocolate like this, and it tells you that there's a 1/4 ounce for each of the little squares. So they've basically downsized this and cut it in half. The Frango Mint Pie also has butter. I've got 2 sticks of butter. It has confectioner sugar that's also known as icing sugar. As I mentioned, it has eggs, and then it also has peppermint extract, and it has a touch of vanilla. And I've got my ingredients measured out. The chocolate, that chocolate bar needs to be melted. I've pre-melted my chocolate, and that's going to go in there. This melted chocolate is also really good for making brownies. I prefer brownies made with chocolate like that to other kinds of brownies. So I'm going to move these things over so you can see what I'm doing. My butter, I've softened. I've had it out since this morning. So I'm going to be turning my mixer on, and I'm going to be creaming my powdered sugar and my butter together. And if it gets too stiff, I'm going to start to add the eggs one by one. And when you're adding eggs to a recipe like this, you want to make sure that you beat the eggs really well after you've added each one. And I don't know how well you could see it, but it was a little bit dry and it's starting to throw up powdered sugar. So I'm going to go ahead and add my first egg in here. And as I mentioned, we want to really mix that up very well. add some more of the sugar, and then I'll add the rest of the eggs in there. My recollection is that the original recipe for this called for these to be mixed in a blender, and mixing it in a blender is certainly an option if you don't have a mixer, and it does make it come out like really smooth and creamy. My blender, the blade doesn't come out of the bottom, so it's hard to get all the stuff out of the mixer, so I prefer to use this kind of a device. But if you have one of the blenders where you can unscrew the blade from it and you can squeegee the contents of the blender out from the bottom, that would be a possibility for mixing this up as well. So I've got my eggs and sugar pretty well beaten in there. I'm going to go ahead and scrape some of the sugar down from the side of the bowl and give that a mix. And then I'm going to be adding the melted chocolate in there. And then lastly, my vanilla and my mint flavorings. So let me give this one more mix here. Okay, and I've beaten that up until it's really smooth. So now I'm going to add in my melted chocolate. Again, this is unsweetened chocolate, and you can see it's quite liquidy. I melted it in a very heavy little pot over a low flame. The one that I made yesterday I melted in the microwave, and I wouldn't recommend doing that because it actually started to kind of burn the chocolate a little bit. So melting it in a very heavy bottom pot over a low flame is really the way to go. And if you don't have this kind of pot, you could always do a double boiler, which is setting one pot inside of another pot that's set on top of boiling water. If you do that, you just want to make sure not to get any of the water inside of the chocolate because it can alter the consistency of the chocolate. Okay, I'm going to scrape this down one more time before I add in my seasoning, which is the mint and the vanilla. I just don't want to have any streaks of the butter and egg surviving intact in there. And I've got my vanilla and my mint pre-measured, so I'm just going to go ahead and add those in. I actually like to double the amount of the mint that's in here because I prefer having a very strong flavor. So this is done, and I don't know if you can really see the consistency, but it looks kind of like a chocolate whipped cream. It also, as I mentioned, it has the consistency of a French silk pie. So I'm going to go ahead and scoop as much of that as I can here into this pie pan. And as you can see, it's really soft right now. And move this over a little bit so you can maybe see it a little bit better. And I can definitely smell the chocolate and the mint in there. Now, because of having the butter in there, which is at room temperature right now, as this chills down, the filling is going to solidify. And so when you slice it, it's going to have a consistency more like the butter. So this is going to need to go and chill for at least 4 hours. If you can do it the day ahead, that's a good thing to do. Because it's nice and cold and it's solid, it's a good pie that travels well. And I'm going to show you another little tool that I love using for making the topping. And this is a cream whipper. So this is this little device right here. And this is, you put the cream in here, the heavy whipping cream, and you put a CO2 charger in here, and when you screw it on and attach the charger to it, it puffs up the whipping cream. It injects air into it so it beats it for you, and then that way you have your own little homemade whipping cream dispenser. And it's a fun thing. It's a nice little gift to get for people, you know, especially like for a wedding or something like that. It's not an expensive thing. And I can't get my cream open. Let me see. Let's try this. Live TV, y'all. There we go. So I'm going to take a cup of this whipping cream and pour it into my little charger. I like my whipping cream to be lightly sweetened, but to have a really nice vanilla flavor. So I'm going to pour that in there. I've got probably about 1.5 tablespoons of powdered sugar already measured out. I tend to use powdered sugar in here. I think it dissolves better into the whipping cream. And I'm going to put a little shot of vanilla in here. Just a little bit, probably about 1 teaspoon to give it a nice little flavoring. And then I'm going to screw the top on here. And I'm going to give this a little shake, and then I'm going to unscrew this, and this is where my soda charger or my cream charger is going to go. There's actually 2 different kinds of chargers. There's one for making soda water, and there's one for making whipping cream. So I've got an industrial sized box of these little CO2 chargers, and you drop it in there, and then you screw this back on here. And I'm going to be quiet because as it opens up you should hear a whoosh, and that's what's going to inject the air into the whipping cream. Did you hear that? I'm going to screw it all the way on, and I'm going to go ahead and give it a shake here. And now I don't feel or hear any liquids in there anymore. Now I pre-made a pie yesterday, so I'm going to go ahead and serve a piece so you can see what it looks like. And then I'm going to garnish it with my whipped cream out of my whipped cream charger. So here's the pie that I made yesterday. You can either garnish it by putting the whipping cream on top of the whole thing, or you can do like I'm going to do and do a slice. And then just garnish that. So to serve this from the whipping cream charger, this end is a little funnel for serving it. You turn it upside down and you turn the handle. That wasn't supposed to happen, but there you go. There is the Franco Mint Pie with the homemade whipping cream garnish on top. This is a really tasty dish, so if you're not too squeamish about using the raw eggs, and there are safe ways to use them, I would really encourage you to try it. This is a dish, it's not for people who are going to be taking a cholesterol test necessarily, but it's the festive season and people tend to go a little bit overindulgent or more indulgent during this time. And I thought that this would be a nice recipe to share with you today. So from Joan's Kitchen, that's it for today. I hope you all have a wonderful holiday if you celebrate, and I'll see you again next week. Oh, and before I go, I wanted to mention that today is December 21st, and there's going to be a special conjunction of the planets Jupiter and Saturn visible in the sky tonight. It's supposed to be about 30 minutes after sunset, so if you have clear skies by you, take a look for it. This is kind of like the nativity star, so it's a pretty special occurrence. And that's all for now. See you next week. Bye-bye.